Hey, this is Jürgen Rasmussen speaking. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. If you're following this vlog, you know that I recently made an episode about Dave Elman's teachings around hypnosis. And I made a critique of what I think are the strengths and weaknesses of his teachings and his approach. And one of my colleagues responded and said that Elman really deserves some credit for his definition of hypnosis. He wrote that Elman had done a really neat job of coming up with a definition that was as good as it gets, pretty much, when it comes to something as complex as hypnosis. And I thought about that, and I decided to make a video about does Dave Elman's definition of hypnosis really stand up to scrutiny? So let's have a look at this. The pros and the cons, the weaknesses and the strengths of that particular definition, what it includes and what it kind of leaves out. So I have the Bible here itself, Dave Elman's Hypnotherapy, just to make sure that I quote him completely accurately. So Elman writes, hypnosis is a state of mind in which the critical faculty of the human is bypassed and selective thinking established. He further writes, the critical faculty of your mind is the part that passes judgment. It distinguishes between the concepts of hot and cold, sweet and sour, large and small, dark and light. If we can bypass this critical faculty in such a way that you no longer distinguish between hot and cold, sweet and sour, we can substitute selective thinking for conventional judgment making. And then he also writes, selective thinking is whatever you believe wholeheartedly. For example, if you are led to believe that you will feel no pain, and you believe it completely, you will have no pain. Let the slightest doubt come in, and the selective thinking vanishes. The critical faculty is no longer bypassed. You will feel pain at normal level. So this is an interesting thing, and I think, of course, all definitions are limited, and all definitions might capture aspect of some phenomena and not capture aspects of some phenomena. So I think the thing that Elman's definition captures is that when people engage in what we call hypnosis or a hypnotic ritual, there is a focusing of attention. And there is a focusing on attention in such a way that one gets absorbed into a suggested idea or reality. And as a result of that, there's less reality thinking. There's less awareness of the context or things that kind of contradict the idea. So there absolutely is something to that. And I think that this frame that Elman uses is very effective. For example, if you're about to, let's say give someone a shot or blood work, or, help them with pain, and you can kind of help them lock their mind around an idea and have that idea realized. On the other hand, I don't think it's a very good definition. And I think it kind of misses a lot of the important elements that I think are going on when it comes to, when it comes to hypnosis. So for example, first of all, counterexamples. I have seen a lot of examples where people are in full belief that they will feel no pain, or in full belief they're convinced that they're going to be comfortable on the plane, for example, and then they feel pain. Or they go into the airplane and they have a panic attack. And they're shocked and surprised and shaken by it. So the first kind of obvious counterexample to me is that people can very strongly believe something and then not manifest that particular belief in an actual experience. I've also had the opposite happen. I've had sessions with clients where I've told them stories, offered perspectives, engaged them in experiments where it has to me looked as if they're getting absorbed into certain ideas, but the client has left the session unconvinced, thinking, I don't think, that Rasmussen guy just told me some stories and I don't think anything's really changed. And they stun themselves by being completely comfortable on the plane, or no longer at all desiring cigarettes, or their allergic responses being gone. So these are examples of, people can not believe something and still have a desired change. They may still be impacted by an idea or get absorbed into an idea. So in the NLP world, there's something we call the cameraman effect, right? You have some innocent cameraman who's filming a seminar, and during that seminar, the NLP practitioner or trainer or hypnosis pro might be doing a smoking cessation session with someone, or helping them with a habit or a phobia or an allergy or something like that. And the camera guy is just watching, he has no intention to change anything, but he finds himself after the seminar looking at his cigarettes and feeling no urge to smoke, or his cat allergy is suddenly gone, or after having watched someone else go through it, or his own stage fright is no longer there after having watched someone on stage go through it. And this kind of shows that people can be in a state where they kind of their inner mind, so to speak, kind of resonates with an idea and makes it real without the person at a conscious level necessarily believing in it or noticing that anything has shifted. Of course, we're being influenced all the time by things. So as Robert Cialdini points out in his magnificent book, Influence, which I highly recommend getting if you haven't gotten it, the idea of social proof, for example. So most of us have a tendency to kind of do what most other people do, especially if we're kind of uncertain. So if you take, for example, a bar, and there's this cup or something, or where there's tip. If there's quite a bit of tip in it, that has a tendency to influence more people to tip, because the social proof kind of suggests that that's what you do, right? If there's little tip, people have a tendency often to tip less. Or if someone sees a restaurant and they see a line forming outside, more people want to enter the restaurant than if they see a restaurant that's kind of empty, or it doesn't seem to be many people desiring to go there. So that's an example of a kind of psychological mechanism influencing people. Now, are their beliefs changed in any way, or is it accurate to call this hypnosis? I don't think so, really. But that's of course a different discussion. I also think, I mean, for me, and this isn't a perfect description either, but for me, hypnosis seems to consist of, if you take a hypnotic ritual, one person's kind of offering suggestions, and the other person is on some level engaging with these suggestions and making them as real as real. So there's an element of absorption and being focused, of really resonating with something. And there's also the experience usually of something being non-volitional, as in, my arm's just moving. It's just kind of happening. I'm not the one doing it. So hypnotic behavior tends to be simultaneously intentional and experienced as non-volitional at the same time. It's that kind of sense of dissociation of the arms just moving, or it's just happening. I'm not the one doing it. That really seems to be the hallmark of something being defined as hypnotic, versus I'm kind of doing this, right? Of course, the I that's doing it is also a positive hallucination of sorts, but that's another topic. So the reason I mentioned, so Jay Haley had an interesting definition of hypnosis, which also includes some things and leaves out a lot of other things, and that is he talked about hypnosis being the first paradox that he and Gregory Bateson and others at the Palo Alto Research Group discovered. And the paradox was that in hypnosis, you're directing someone to behave spontaneously. You're directing someone to behave spontaneously. So they might say to someone, in a few seconds, that left arm is going to begin lifting. And what they're kind of saying is, I want you to lift your arm, but I don't want you to do it, which is kind of like a double bind. And if the person then responds by lifting their arm, but simultaneously having the experience of, it's not me, I'm not doing it, it's just kind of happening by itself, then that qualifies as a hypnotic phenomena. But the interesting thing is, quite often when this happens, the person who's doing it, the hypnotic subject, might be surprised, might be puzzled, might be laughing, might think it's weird, fascinating, or might even be slightly anxious about it, which kind of shows that they have some thinking around it, right? Because if you're laughing, or you kind of think that it's weird, or you're puzzled, or you're surprised, that kind of suggests some amount of dissociation, or it kind of, in my mind at least, contradicts Elman's definition. So I've seen, for example, and I'm sure that you've seen the same thing if you've done hypnosis with people. You may have a person who's responding really well, and you're offering the suggestion, for example, that their feet will be stuck to the floor, and the more they try to lift them, the more the feet will stay stuck. And you might see that the person's responding to the suggestion, and they're kind of simultaneously giving you a smirk, or like a yeah right, as if that's going to happen. And then they try to lift their feet, and you can see that they're genuinely surprised, like they're stunned. They have this holy shit response, right? If you've done hypnosis, you've seen this on multiple occasions. So people can be very surprised by what emerges during a hypnosis session. There's also, of course, an element if you communicate with the person you're working with. Let's say that you're suggesting amnesia for a number, and let's say that the person doesn't say the number 4, the one that you suggested amnesia for. Some people might say, you know what, I didn't forget the number 4, but the muscles, in my throat, constricted, so I couldn't get the word out. Other people might be sitting there, and they're thinking, and they're going 1, 2, 3, 4, or they might not get it, but they know that something's wrong, like something's not quite right. For other people, they may have completely bought into the idea as they just go 1, 2, 3, 4, and they count till 11, and there's not even that sign of anything being wrong. Like they've so completely lost the context. Or in the case of a hallucination, when someone says, "Yeah, I saw the tennis ball that was suggested," For a lot of people, it's kind of like a both and phenomena. Like it was there, but I simultaneously knew that it wasn't. This is very common. Like I kind of saw it, but I simultaneously know that it wasn't there. Martin Orn, who talked a lot about translogic, and this is a kind of disputed idea. There's controversy around this, and I'm aware of that. But one of the ways that he kind of differentiated between uh, highly hypnotizable folks and people who were faking was that let's say that you suggested to someone that they move up from their chair and that they walk out the door, for example, and you put a person in between you and the door, and you suggest a negative hallucination that they will no longer see the person standing there. The fakes have a tendency to just walk straight into the person they've been asked to negatively hallucinate. The highly hypnotizable ones tend to not do that. They have a tendency to walk around the person, but still claim that they couldn't see him. So it's this trans logic. It's this kind of both and logic. And then, of course, you have people who. I remember one young woman I did hypnosis with once, and this was very early in my career, and I had her hallucinate a tennis ball. And after the session, she said, "Where's the tennis ball?" I tried to convince her that there never was a tennis ball, and she just wouldn't have it. It had been so real to her in a sense. Elman's definition to me sounds more like a definition of obedience or blind belief, like a person who's just subject to a particular set of ideas, who has no perspective on them, whether it's a religious ideology or political ideology, that just views the world through a particular lens or assumption and literally has no perspective on it, like the true believer. But I don't know how useful it is to define that as hypnosis necessarily. Um, if you talk about obedience, for example, with the classic Stanley Milgram experiments, if you haven't read up on that, you definitely should. Some of the most important psychological research ever done. Or you look at Zimbardo's prison experiment, or Salomon Asch's experience on obedience. Um, I mean, sometimes people just comply out of blind faith. And then at other times, people are just being conformists or cowards or kind of submitting because they don't want to be ostracized or something like that, which kind of shows that they have some perspective on the ideas. So, I mean, the thing with hypnosis is that it has a tendency to turn into whatever you suggest that it is. So if you look at a lot of Erickson's work, for example, a lot of what emerged as phenomena or changes during the sessions was a surprise to the person's, to use that term, conscious mind. Even if you take something as simple as the typical thing where he would talk about hand levitation and say, I don't know which arm is going to lift. It might be your left arm, might be your right arm, and will it happen quickly or slowly, and this and that. And suddenly the person would find one of the arms beginning to lift and be surprised and start to giggle and start to so that also too is a hypnotic phenomena. And of course what happens during hypnosis is that on some level a suggested idea is made real, and it's experienced as non-volitional, but it might be the result of a story or a particular idea or a process where the person unconsciously discovers something or has some sort of insight, and that shifts their experience. And they may not necessarily believe in it either at a kind of conscious level. As I started saying, I've had quite a few clients leave my office thinking nothing happened, just to surprise themselves by discovering that, when I see the spider or meet new people, that old non-volitional fear response is no longer there. And as I said, I've had the opposite. I've had people who have been completely convinced that they've changed. And as soon as they're back into the context, they're completely stunned by discovering that what they believed, at least at a kind of cognitive level, didn't necessarily influence their actual, felt response. So I hope this video was useful to you. I'd be curious to hear to what extent this matches your thinking and your experience, whether you agree, disagree, partially agree. I'd love to hear it. Let me know wherever you find the video. As always, know that I see clients on Skype from all over the world. If you'd like to book a session with me and make some changes, you can contact me at provocativhypnosis.com. I also offer mentoring. And if you're watching this in 2022, I'm doing a seminar called Painful Illusions online the weekend of November 26th and 27th. Go to provocativhypnosis.com, the seminar page. I'm also speaking at the UK Hypnosis Convention on November 11th. The presentation is titled Psychological Illusion Model 2.0, which is the model that I teach. So hope to see some of you there. Okay, thanks for listening.